Laura's celebrations are magnificent. At the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
When Camilla's daughter threw shade at Princess Anne, nobody in that glittering room expected what followed next. The air didn't just shift, it cracked. You could feel it, like a glass about to shatter, the kind of silence that makes people freeze mid-sip, mid-blink, mid-breath. Windsor Castle glowed that night, gold trim catching candlelight, banners hanging straight and proud, glass reflecting every flicker like the walls themselves were watching. Musicians played softly, the kind of polite music meant to fade into elegance. This was Princess Anne's night, decades of service, 20,000 engagements, a lifetime of grit, discipline, and duty that never once asked for applause. Everyone in that room knew why they were there: to honor the backbone of the House of Windsor. And then Laura Lopez leaned into a tight circle and dropped a remark that hit like a lit match tossed into dry straw. Old-fashioned. That single word slid out of her mouth with a sneer, aimed straight at Anne's style, her way, her work. A few nervous laughs followed, not because it was funny, but because shock makes people reach for sound. Others stiffened, unsure whether they'd really just heard what they thought they heard. They had, and what made it land heavier, sharper, was who stood behind her. Queen Camilla, mother, protector. Indulgent to a fault, careless maybe in moments like this. The feeling in the room wasn't imagined. It wasn't whispered. It hit like a drumbeat. Prince William saw everything. He didn't react at first. He's learned that skill the hard way, the art of holding still while the temperature changes. He watched the ripple move through the crowd. A purse snapped shut. A glass froze midair. An accordionist pretended to read the program while missing every note. Princess Anne stood just a few steps away, finishing her thanks to donors who had stood by Save the Children through storms and calm seas alike. Then came the silence. Clean, sharp, cold. Anne's jaw locked, barely visible but unmistakable. Her eyes softened like they always do when duty absorbs a blow meant to hurt. She didn't turn toward the insult. She turned back to a charity veteran and calmly asked about a school in Malawi. Unshakable, like a stone bridge in pouring rain. William's hands curled, then flattened. He stepped forward, not to argue, not to confront, but to shield. He closed the space between Anne and Laura's circle. No words needed. The message was unmistakable. Camilla noticed. She moved too, just enough to place herself at Laura's shoulder. Her smile stayed fixed. Her eyes hardened behind glass. She wouldn't let the room turn on her daughter. She had fought too long to protect her family inside these walls. Somewhere in the quartet, a string snapped. Only the musicians heard it, but it matched the tension in the air. Then Catherine arrived, late by exactly 10 minutes. Never rushed, never accidental. She crossed the threshold like a conductor reading an orchestra on the edge of collapse. Her eyes found Anne first. One look passed between them. "I'm fine, I've got this, carry on." Then Catherine saw William. His face was marble, but his eyes betrayed everything. She touched his cuff, grounding him. Only then did she turn to Camilla and Laura. No frown, no wide smile, just a small, precise greeting. "I see you." Not, "I approve." The room exhaled. Conversations resumed. Music found its beat. The castle breathed again, though the spark still smoldered buried deep in the carpet. No one crushed it. Everyone stepped carefully around it. Catherine moved through the room like she owned the air. Quiet, confident, deliberate. She thanked an archivist, admired an ambassador's sash, asked a volunteer how many hours she'd logged this month. Every moment short, warm, real. Each step brought her closer. She stopped near Laura, appearing casual, almost accidental, but nothing about Catherine ever is. Laura straightened, chin lifted. Courage? Pride? Both. Catherine complimented the lighting choices for a recent exhibition. She knew Laura's work. She always does her homework. "You place the light to honor the texture," Catherine said softly. "That was thoughtful." Laura blinked. "Thank you. We tried to make it feel current." Catherine held the word gently, turning it like fragile china. "Current is good," she said, "when it carries what matters forward. No bite, no edge, a sentence like a cool hand on a fevered head." Laura nodded, unsure if she'd been praised or warned. Catherine didn't make her choose. "May I introduce you to Mrs. Harwood?" she said, gesturing toward a gray-haired woman with clear eyes and a straight back. "She's been with Save the Children longer than I've been alive." Mrs. Harwood told a quiet story. A clinic roof, a storm, and holding a flashlight for 3 hours. No cameras, no speeches, just work. Mattresses moved, letters written until funds arrived. "Nothing old-fashioned about fixing a leaking roof," she said. Laura swallowed. "I only meant," of course, Catherine cut in gently, saving her. "We all want the work to reach people today." Firm softness, a spine across the room. William stayed near Anne, didn't look at Laura again. Camilla watched, jaw tightening, then stilling. She didn't like where the power had settled. Tonight, the moral center of the room room wasn't hers. Later, Catherine found Camilla alone in a corridor. "This is Anne's night," Catherine said quietly. "I know what night it is," Camilla replied. "Then help Laura understand what the room is built on," Catherine said. "We can be current." "But careless. We cannot be. Are you scolding me?" "I'm inviting you," Catherine said softly to protect her more wisely. Silence. "I meant no harm," Camilla said. "Harm often arrives unannounced," Catherine replied, "but it still hits. You're very sure of yourself." "No," Catherine said. "I'm sure of Anne." That landed. "I'll speak to her," Camilla said at last. "Thank you." Catherine bowed, not required, therefore meaningful. Anne later took the dies. "No notes, no teleprompter. Nothing old about feeding a child," she said. "Nothing new about doing the right thing. There's only the next thing." Applause washed over everything, awkward corners included. The spark didn't die, it moved. By morning, seating charts shifted. Memos circulated. Courtesy. Restraint. No names. Everyone understood. William drove to Gatcom, no escort. Anne met him in boots. "She's fine," Anne said. "You shouldn't have to be," he replied. "Family is where you practice patience," Anne said. Catherine, meanwhile, was already planning. Gallery preview. Volunteers invited. Laura included. No press. Truth instead of gossip. Laura came. "I didn't know," she admitted. "Few do," Catherine said. "That's the point. Work replaced words." Later came tea. Ground rules. Service honored and not discussed. And then the clinic. Rain. Mud. Generator. Work. Laura pulled the cord. The hum caught. Light stayed on. Vaccine fridge held cold. No drama, just results. Catherine watched, satisfied. This is how power really moves. Quiet, precise, unavoidable. And by the time the gossip tried to rise again, there was nothing left to feed it because the lights were on, the roof didn't leak, and the work spoke louder than words ever could. The rain didn't stop when the cameras left. That mattered. It always does. Because when the lenses go dark and the headlines move on, that's when truth either collapses or holds. The clinic kept humming through the night. That low, steady sound from the generator wasn't dramatic, wasn't poetic, but it meant vaccines stayed cold, lights stayed on, and a mother didn't have to rock her child in the dark wondering if help would arrive too late. Catherine stood back and let the room breathe. She didn't center herself. She never does. Power like hers works best when people forget who moved the first piece. Laura stood near the doorway, shoes ruined, hair damp, hands stained with mud and ink from paperwork signed too fast. For the first time since Windsor, she didn't look defensive. She looked useful. That was new. That was earned. "You didn't flinch," Catherine said quietly, not praise, just observation. Laura exhaled. "I didn't have time." "Exactly," Catherine replied. "That's where the work lives." A nurse laughed nearby, soft and relieved. Someone passed around tea in chipped mugs. No china, no footmen, just warmth. Laura watched it all, eyes tracking something she hadn't seen before. Not admiration, not reverence, alignment. People working without checking who outranked whom. Back in London, the narrative tried to regroup. A columnist floated the word rift again, testing if it still had teeth. It didn't. The pictures didn't cooperate. Generators, nurses, muddy boots, and smiling once, brief, unshowy. William crouched at a child's height. Catherine listening, not speaking. Rift stories starve when there's proof of function. Camilla saw the coverage before breakfast. She didn't throw the paper. She didn't comment. She folded it once carefully and set it aside. That alone was a shift. She had spent years surviving storms by standing still inside them. This time, the storm had passed through her house and changed the furniture. Later that day, she called Catherine. "You didn't embarrass her," Camilla said. "It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't accusation. It was assessment. I gave her something solid to hold," Catherine replied. "Embarrassment is what gossip does. A pause, long enough to matter." "She looked capable," Camilla said finally. Catherine didn't soften her voice. "She is. She just needed the room to prove it." Another pause. Then, quieter, "I forget sometimes that protection can weaken." "We all do," Catherine said, "especially mothers." That landed differently. No armor, just truth. At Clarence house that evening, the atmosphere shifted by inches, not miles, but inches count in palaces. Laura arrived without stiffness. She greeted Anne directly. No excuses. No long speech. "I chose the wrong words," she said. "I understand why now." Anne nodded once. Not warm, not cold. Finished. That was the gift. Closure without theater. William watched from across the room, hands in pockets, shoulders lighter than they'd been in days. Catherine met his eyes briefly. Nothing needed saying. This wasn't a win. It was maintenance, roof work, beam alignment. The kind of thing no one claps for until it fails. The gala that followed went exactly as planned, which is to say, quietly corrected. Volunteers front row, titles behind. Cameras pointed where Catherine wanted them without being told. A podcaster tried to bait Laura again. Catherine stepped in smoothly. "You should speak to the matron. She can explain why power outages cost lives." The microphone turned. The trap dissolved. By midnight, the story had shifted completely. Headlines no longer asked who said what. They asked how much had been raised, who secured the generators, why the clinic model worked. Anne's name appeared where it belonged, next to outcomes, not aesthetics. Laura went home that night exhausted and changed. She drafted emails instead of statements, specs instead of apologies. By morning, 2 more clinics were scheduled. Camilla noticed. She said nothing. Silence can be a form of respect. Catherine wrote her notes by hand, as always, 1 to the matron, 1 to Mrs. Harwood, 1 to Laura. The same words in each. Thank you for showing up, because that was the truth that tied it all together. Not fashion, not hierarchy, not bloodline. Showing up when it's inconvenient, staying when it's uncomfortable, choosing weight over words. Later, alone, Catherine stood at a window as rain traced the glass again. She prefers rain. It reveals weak structures fast. It shows who scrambles for cover and who reaches for tools. Tomorrow would bring another test. It always does. Another careless sentence. Another room charged with history and ego. Another moment where silence might be easier than correction. But tonight, the lights were on, the fridge was cold, the work had spoken. And in a family built on spectacle, that quiet, stubborn function, that refusal to let noise outrank necessity, was the real inheritance being passed down. Not loudly, not perfectly, but firmly enough to hold. The palace settled into sleep, unaware of how close it had come to fracture, unaware of how carefully it had been steadied. That's how it usually goes. The best work leaves no fingerprints, only results. Fingerprints, only results. Fingerprints, only results. Fingerprints.